St. Augustine, Commentary on the Gospel of John, chapter 19, verse 23 and 24 following. And in another place to know also the love of Christ, which far excels knowledge, and still further elsewhere, and above all these things, charity, which is the bound of perfection. Colossians chapter 3 verse 14, and just before Ephesians chapter 3 verse 19. If then charity both has a more excellent way, and far excels knowledge, and is enjoined above all things, it is with great propriety that the garment by which it is signified is represented as woven from the top. And it was without seam, that its sewing might never be separated, and came into the possession of one man, because he gathers all into one. Just as in the case of the apostles, who formed the exact number of 12, in other words, were divisible into 4 parts of 3 each, when the question was put to all of them. Peter was the only one that answered, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." And to whom it was said, "I will give unto you the keys of the kingdom of heaven." Matthew chapter 16, verse 15, 16, and 19. As if he alone received the power of binding and loosing, seeing then that one so spoke in behalf of all, and received the latter along with all, as if personifying the unity itself, therefore one stands for all, because there is unity in all. Whence also after here saying, woven from the top, he added, throughout. And this also, if referred to its meaning, implies that no one is excluded from a share thereof, who is discovered to belong to the whole, from which whole, as the Greek language indicates, the Church derives her name of Catholic, and by the casting of lots, what else is commanded but the grace of God? For in this way, in the person of one, it reached to all, since the lot satisfied them all, because the grace of God also in its unity reaches unto all. And when the lot is cast, the award is decided not by the merits of each individual, but by the secret judgment of God. And yet, let no one say that such things had no good signification, because they were done by the bad, that is to say, not by those who followed Christ, but by those who persecuted him. For what could we have to say of the cross itself, which everyone knows was in like manner made and fastened to Christ by enemies and sinners? And yet it is to it we may rightly understand the words of the Apostle to be applicable. What is the breadth and the length and the height and the depth? Ephesians chapter 3 verse 18. For its breadth lies in the transverse beam, on which the hands of the crucified are extended, and signifies good works in all the breadth of love. Its length extends from the transverse beam to the ground, and is that whereto the back and feet are affixed, and signifies perseverance through the whole length of time to the end. Its height is in the summit, which rises upwards above the transverse beam, and signifies the supernal goal, to which all works have reference, since all things that are done well and perseveringly, in respect of their breadth and length, are to be done also with due regard to the exalted character of the divine rewards. Its depth is found in the part that is fixed into the ground, for there it is both concealed and invisible, and yet from thence spring up all those parts that are outstanding and evident to the senses, just as all that is good in us proceeds from the depth of the grace of God, which is beyond the reach of human comprehension and judgment. But even though the cross of Christ signified no more than what was said by the apostle, and they who are Jesus Christ's have crucified the flesh with the passions and lusts. Galatians chapter 5 verse 24. How great a good it is, and yet it does not this unless the good spirit be lusting against the flesh, seeing that it was the opposing, or in other words, the evil spirit that constructed the cross of Christ. And lastly, as everyone knows, what else is the sign of Christ but the cross of Christ? For unless that sign be applied, whether it be to the foreheads of believers, or to the very water out of which they are regenerated, or to the oil with which they receive the anointing chrism, or to the sacrifice that nourishes them, none of them is properly administered. How then can it be that no good is signified by that which is done by the wicked, when by the cross of Christ, which the wicked made, every good thing is sealed to us in the celebration of his sacraments? But here we stop, and what follows we shall consider at another time in the course of dissertation, as God shall grant us assistance.